Welcome. My name is Rachel Foster and I am the current Deputy Head Teacher and Teaching School Director at Blean Primary School in Kent. So Blean Primary School is a larger than average primary school, 2-form entry. Pupils whose first language is not English is higher than the national, and those children eligible for the pupil premium is lower, and SEND tend to sit just below or in line with the national figure. We are currently designated as a teaching school and we serve an ethnically diverse community. So, if research-informed schools are the answer, what is the question? Now, I've started with this because wherever we are in developing research in our own schools, I think it is important we question the why. Why use evidence-informed materials? Why complete action research? Why collaborate across schools using research to develop practice? The asking of the why has been an important part of our journey, and I use the reverse answer question scenario before embarking on any new initiative because I find it makes us stop and think. For example, apply it to mindfulness or forest schools or extending the school day. I believe the why is a really good starting point. So for some, using the EEF materials and toolkit as a starting point can provide the background for choosing approaches for certain aspects of school improvement. The meta-analysis has been done for you. For others, it might be that you want to develop curiosity amongst your staff team about teaching and learning and create a platform for professional dialogue. I'll give you an example. If I had only looked at the EEF lesson study, I may not have experimented with this at my school some time ago. However, what we saw with our findings was an improvement in the teaching of fluency in maths and of pupils' understanding. So we adopted action research about 9 years ago now, and that was for several reasons. Number one, our why was we wanted a culture change from a directive leadership culture to one more transformational, centred around teaching and learning. And I think it really does depend on the context and the situation of your school. And secondly, we wanted to create a teacher leader model where teachers and teaching assistants, including higher level teaching assistants, felt autonomous in their work and to be real agents of change. That's what we really wanted. So our journey began through working with Canterbury Christchurch University, and they facilitated the first round of action research throughout a whole academic year. And staff had the freedom to complete research in groups of their choice and on any topic that really interested them. The first round was for senior leaders, teachers, and HLTAs, and the groups were mixed, and there were differing topics ranging from examining whole school culture to children sitting on the carpet in year 3. Projects were not only shared amongst the staff team, but also published in a booklet and then shared with our community. And for us, I think that was a really good place to start because they really modelled that process for us. And we gained such an understanding that research isn't always neat and tidy or scary. And I think for our staff team, that was a really important message. So what? This is the so what question. So the impact for us of using research was associated with individual projects. And some outcomes in that first round led to whole school change. So what started as something quite small then really grew into something really important that changed at whole school level. But the second thing is that lurking beneath the surface were often more subtle changes. that were almost as important as the impact of the projects. For example, the team were working together in a way which was not hierarchical. Senior leaders were beginning to let go of that control and let experimentation of practice happen. There were professional discussions around, I would really like to try this out, or over time, through this sustained practice, there has been a culture change of being willing to try out new things. An example of this is our Spanish teacher. I was working with the University of Madrid and they were explaining CLIL, Content and Language Integrated Learning. And I listened with interest as the professor explained that a subject is taught in the target language rather than the first language of the students. So I got very excited by this. And as a result, I spoke to our Spanish teacher and she researched CLIL and discovered in the UK there was very little evidence of this in primary schools. So she trialled it, she tested it out, and our Year 6 children to this day learn an art unit through speaking only in Spanish as they progress throughout the whole school. This is what they lead to in Year 6, and it uses the CLIL approach. It's amazing to see, and I believe a research culture can lead to innovation and risk taking, which is what we wanted. That was our why. So what came next? So since our first year with Canterbury Christ Church University, we've conducted action research on an annual basis. The themes typically link to our school development plan and are broad enough for class teachers and teaching assistants to make relevant for their own class. So this is varied year on year, from the use of pupil voice to spelling to the learning of maths for pupils with special educational needs or disabilities. This also forms part of the appraisal process. So an objective each year will be around action research. From 2017 onwards, we worked with other schools on collective projects to learn from each other, a bit like a knowledge exchange, really. So we've also supported schools in setting up action research systems and guided them through the process so that they can then lead it in their own schools. And one project in particular, I remember observing a knowledge exchange event between my school and others, where they were sharing their findings from their early years research project. Now, this was a pivotal moment for me as I witnessed the whole early years team reflecting on their projects, including the teaching assistants and an apprentice teaching assistant, all talking confidently about their research, pupil learning, and their next steps. And I was blown away. The level of curiosity and interest from all parties was phenomenal. And isn't that what we want? We want all adults to think deeply and to be curious about the children that they work with, to adapt their practices and to meet the varying needs of different children. This is the culture that I think is really important in schools. This is the culture I believe collective research can support. For example, issues such as workload, marking and feedback have all been worked through and developed using a research approach so that it then informs our policies and frameworks that reflect the team's research and recommendations. Appointing a research lead was integral to the process, and guiding staff through the various stages and supporting them with access to additional reading, materials, methodologies, and the kind of ethics that underpin the work that we do. That has actually been pivotal because that person can draw that all together. And as we all know, time is currency in schools. So as leaders, we need to provide the time for it, demonstrating its value. So this is a typical cycle that we use, although it has varied over the years. This is one we have used recently. So this doesn't happen neatly, as action research can be that messy process. And encouraging staff to sit and work with this can be liberating and challenging. So providing time is essential via staff learning, meeting sessions, proportions of inset days, discussed at pupil progress meetings, appraisal reviews, etc. But I feel it is something that has to be planned for and mapped in. So it's not seen as something additional, but something integral for school improvement. So typically in this cycle, we might start with ask, with the research question, work around the cycle, but then think, actually, no, we've got to go back. We've got to go back to our question and really think about what it is that we're wanting to find out. And staff are used to that. They're really comfortable now with the fact that you don't go neatly round the cycle. It can go backwards and forwards. So, the impact. Sometimes the impact might not be what you had hoped for, particularly if it has been linked to a whole school objective from your development plan. But what went wrong is another question that I'm really interested in. We can often get paralysed by the word impact and data in schools. But I'm also really interested in why something didn't work, as this can tell such a powerful narrative. And I mentioned at the beginning that often through the research, there were other changes or outcomes lurking beneath the surface that we found equally as interesting or challenging, and certainly some aspects that required further reflection. So an example of this is the idea of appraisal targets and this kind of fixation on data. So there have been many aspects of school practice that we have adapted, and as a result of action research, but one of them is around appraisal targets. So we included action research as an appraisal target from year 2 onwards, so the second year of our journey. And this meant that we were all engaged with the process. So whilst in lots of ways this represented a focus on the research and this was positive in terms of our school culture, there was still this juxtaposition with other practices which focused on pupil data as an outcome. So then I read The Tyranny of Metrics by Muller. So in his book, he examines different sectors, including education, and how our attempts to improve organisational outcomes through quantitative measures have created gaming and manipulation of data. It explores the idea of what gets measured gets managed, and a great Peter Drucker. And as a result of this, we can often miss or pay less attention to really important aspects of education. For example, developing pupil character or wider curriculum subjects. So we can end up working harder and longer on activities that require compiling information and reports, which add little value to the education of the children and potentially sapping teacher enthusiasm and contributing to a recruitment and retention issue. So one of the other targets we always had was on the percentage of pupils making X amount of progress. So each staff member had a pupil-led target. But Muller believes that focusing on performance metrics can dampen innovation and risk-taking. He believes the focus is on that particular data set. So that led me thinking to further redesign the appraisal process so that targets other than the action research target were not on the percentage of pupils making X amount of progress or on attainment measures, but a shift on the pedagogical approaches experimented with to ensure pupils made progress. In making the focus on pedagogy, research, experimenting with interventions, there was a shift from the practice, not the percentage. So I just want to finish with some top tips. I really do feel that senior leaders also embarking on a research alongside their colleagues gives this collegiate feel, and I found that very, very useful. Acknowledging it might not work in the first round. As we said earlier, appoint a research lead that inspires and makes research accessible and not scary. Ensure time is provided, that all important currency. Collaborate across schools and have that kind of knowledge exchange. Refine your approach to maintain interest, so change the approach annually or more regularly. And publish the findings in some way to give back to the system that we're contributing to. If anybody has any further questions or would like any more information, I've just left my email address at the bottom there. Thanks very much.